Absolutely. So, talking about careers, and leading the conversation, we're going to have Nolly, Lindsay, and David. Where do you want to start? Should we start where our careers began and how we got started in the industry? Or have you got a different agenda?
Yeah, I think that's a good start. But I'll let Lindsay and David go first because I'm quite early in my career, so I probably have a lot less to say than Lindsay and David do.
Yeah, David's the oldest.
And David's the oldest.
Well, no.
That's not what I meant.
Lovely to see you, Nolly. Lovely to see you.
Yeah.
Shall I?
I'm going to trump you all because I'm the oldest. I started my career in the city selling telex machines to banks. Be that. David, how did your career start?
In a little office for NatWest Investments about just over 20 years ago, 23 years ago. Left university and was broke, so took a job with Manpower, if anybody remembers that, on answering the telephones for a little private wealth office, and then moved on to a front office role at Barings Asset Management. Do not mention Nick Leeson. It was a long time after that, Nolly. So then moved on to operational risk role, an audit role and compliance role, and then ended up as head of operational risk and then global head of operational risk at ICAP Group, run by Michael Spencer. Then did a little bit of contracting work back in asset management for Janice Henderson, and moved into a small consultancy, attempting to build up an asset management practice. Don't try and do that before a pandemic or during a pandemic. It's a really bad idea. And now I'm at Fidelity with the likes of Sue, who's on the line there, working in their ERM team. That's the potted history of my career.
David, was your degree related to financial services in any way?
It wasn't related to anything. It was politics. So So I can have a good argument and put forward an argument regardless of whether I agree with it. And as I'm speaking, maybe it is. Maybe that is quite good for risk management. I'm not sure, but no, it wasn't. Not really. I tried to get one job with a group of local councillors, and that put me off for life. So it was tangential to say the least.
David, highlights. What's if you could pick the one thing over your career?
Well, do you mean excluding from working with Sue? Obviously, a highlight in my career. I think getting the global role at ICAP because it was a very, very trying place to work, going through a lot of change and under a lot of pressure. It was after LIBOR. I had no role in fixing LIBOR, not that I'm aware of anyway. It was after that. I'd been there a couple of years. I joined as head of operational risk at EMEA, and knew a couple of the CROs. A new CRO came in, and I think it's always good when people come in, they see you work, and they're still as Freudian split, they're still stupid enough to promote you, but no, recognize your value and have seen you worked, because anybody can blag an interview. Don't anybody nod, but you can, right? But when you're in there, it means more, I think, to me, if you get into a role and you're asked to stay, particularly when there's ample opportunity. It was new CRO. She could have swept the boards. She did let some people go. Some of those decisions I agree with, some of them I didn't, but there was ample opportunity to get rid of people, and she didn't take it. I think that one is a big one. And I think also the original move to head of operational risk at Threadneedle, because again, I'd been there 5 years. I'd worked with CRO, agreed with them, disagreed with them on stuff, and and he also gave me the opportunity. So the recurring theme is, if people know what you like and they still give you the chance, then I think it's a big bonus.
Brilliant. Thanks, David.
Can we ask questions all along?
Well, of course you can. Lily.
A question for you, David. It was also this question of the difference between managing a career and just being successful in a career without managing it. What are the skills? Is it a question of spotting opportunities when they come and making the right moves at the right time. I mean, I'm always in two minds. I always feel like I'm not a person who likes this question of having a direction and I'll be there in 5 years' time, etc., etc. I always advise people to say, use your skills and never miss the opportunities when they come, basically. And I was wondering what you think works for you and maybe in general.
Yeah, so I definitely didn't have a career plan. So I'm definitely not on the side of managing, the dreaded question for me, where do you want to be in 5 years? I have absolutely no idea. And I think if it's not too much of a weak answer, I think sometimes that's quite limiting, because I think I'm definitely on the side of taking the opportunities. I'm going to roll out a series of cliches here, but you're absolutely right. Take the opportunities when they come up. I think you have to be prepared to do stuff that you're a little bit scared of and get used to. I know they kind of feel the fear and enjoy it anyway. That's fine if you haven't got a mortgage, child, and the rest of it. But there's an element of truth to it. Don't be afraid to ask. So I've even now, after these years, and in the role I'm doing now, I think 5 years ago I would have been a little more reticent to ask. I'm contracting at the moment, but ask about opportunities and go and speak to people and put my name forward for roles that perhaps come up. And I think not be too scared and not be too scared of failure. So it's kind of a joke that I've used regularly in interviews when people say, what can you bring? And I was going to bring a huge number of mistakes, because you can't, right? You have to be prepared for that. Otherwise you're not taking the chances, and just live with it. Everybody, that it's far better to be somebody that's made mistakes than somebody that can't acknowledge that you have done. And there's probably, maybe there's some coaches at ETW that might disagree with me about not having a plan, but I think it can be limiting. Because does it fit or does it not fit? Well, the opportunities that come your way are the opportunities that come your way. So if it doesn't fit, to an extent you can make other opportunities arrive, but there's you can't fight the universe all the time. So near enough is good enough. It fits broadly with your plan, what you want to do, you think you'll enjoy it, you think you can add something, then go for it.
I'd also not be too impatient. Don't be too impatient about kind of thinking, I've got to be here by here, I've got to be here. Because if you're always thinking about the next thing, you're not enjoying what you're doing. And the reality is, certainly from my perspective, like it's experience. And it's like you're saying, David, sometimes it just takes time for you to then kind of go, oh, that's an opportunity I want to put myself forward for. Sometimes it's confidence, sometimes experience, but it's not that you were lacking it or you failed at it before. It's just that the time that it came, sometimes the confidence to put yourself forward or to be recognized for the right opportunity will come when it comes. And it can be, it's only challenging if you think you should be somewhere else all the time, or should be doing something else all the time.
And I'm, so the other thing about that and patience, and, that comes with a bit of time, is that be wary of driving too hard. I drove very hard for a very long period of time, which makes it sound like I had a plan. I didn't have a plan. I just took a series of steps, and some were steps and some were leaps, and that took a toll on me a few years ago. Back from that now, but I think if you put yourself under, but the one voice you can't ignore is the one that's in your head. So, the self-critical, the kind of push and push and push, you can end up in a pretty dark place in terms of stress, which no career is really worth. And it doesn't add, there's that kind of, overworking becomes quite a popular thing. How long did you work last night? And I'll do it now with people that I work with and say, like, right, well, I won't say, it's nothing to be proud of, but I will say, but do you really want to do that? Do you really, really want to work at the weekend? Do you want to be working late at night? How is it helping you? Doing more is not necessarily achieving more, and it comes at a little bit of a cost sometimes to be wary of.
Lydia, thanks for the question there. I think one of what I've always tried to think about, and it picks up on what David was saying there, is actually live to work or work to live. And my plan has always been where I want to be personally. where I want to be with the family, where I want to be with Tina, where, and my 5-year outlook now is, when can I retire, and what do I need to do to get there? And I've always had that kind of personal plan of where I want to be, and the career is kind of followed on. Anyway, Lindsay, can we talk about early career pivots, please?
Pivot is the most diplomatic word, I think. So, I mean, one was slightly more intended than another. So I started my school life, really, like kind of mid-school life, wanting to, having a very firm view that I wanted to be a TV producer, making documentaries, and worked every possible angle to have work opportunities in TV production companies. I lived at Bristol, so worked down in Bristol. Wherever I possibly could. I did a communications degree because it sounded really interesting. It was a kind of study of the effect of communications on global society, so very fascinating. And worked in TV production post-graduation until I got made redundant. And I was fighting for jobs that were paying 8 or 10 grand a year. And I was like, I just can't afford to live in that. I can't afford to live in London. My parents don't live in London. I can't afford to do this. And so I ended up temping. So my first pivot was a kind of an unintended one, because I just needed to try and pay some bills, and found myself in the fashion manufacturing business, as one does, and got kind of promoted in a very, very hectic, very fast paced, small manufacturing business, which was eye-opening in terms of a new career, eye-opening in terms of learning that I could do something different. It was incredibly detrimental to my health because it was so stressful. But I kind of thought, well, hold on, I'm not going back to TV. Like that career path is dead to me now, unfortunately. So let's just see where I can go. So I changed roles, I reskilled, I did some technical qualifications. And then kind of after a while thought, you know what, I'm not loving this. I don't love this. This isn't my chosen path, and I'm not getting paid. So 2 factors that kind of made me think this is worth a pivot. And a friend of mine she was a PA, she moved to Rothschild to be a PA at Rothschild. She said, this whole finance lark's awesome. So we get paid luncheon vouchers and bonuses, and it's easy. It's like awesome. And I was working in Park Royal as well.
Quick time out, Lindsay. Luncheon vouchers, sure.
I know.
No, come on. No.
Genuinely,
you are not that old.
Rothschild were very old school, I think, and they only quit them a little while ago. So I think that was specific to a very old school shop. Where I ended up, which was Blue Crest, definitely did not have lunch vouchers, but they provided food. So the equivalent, the modern day equivalent was the equivalent Waitrose shop. So yeah, I basically just went, okay, let's see what I can do. I'm just thinking about all my transferable skills. I rewrote my CV several times. I had some friends in the industry that could kind of look at it and go, no, scrap it, start again, no, scrap it, start again. Until I was, back to the bare bones of what are my core transferable skills, what can I bring? And ended up getting 2 job offers at the time. One was at Bank AIG and one was at Blue Crest. And I'm very grateful that I took the role at Blue Crest, because the Bank AIG one would have been obviously a bit of a disaster because it was early 2006. And I kind of didn't look back. I just immersed myself in as much learning as possible. It was the most terrifying experience of my life because I didn't understand a word of what was being said around me. But I learned. I said, I'm a sponge, teach me everything. And I kind of didn't look back. So that was kind of my entry into finance. And then in terms of, and I suppose my biggest kind of learning has been about learning. It's just like I can because I'd already thought, well, I've moved from TV to fashion and reskilled and became qualified in something, so maybe I can just do that again. And I did, and I learned. And the reason I was kind of joking about it, because I was like, I'm never working in finance. I'm terrible at numbers. Maths is not my forte. I'm a words person. I'm a people person. I didn't understand there were jobs in the industry for people like me at all. I just assumed everyone had to be a kind of finance grad or something. And it was, eye-opening that there could be roles for people like me, but I still had to learn. I still got there. I got qualifications. I was probably a bit slower, so because it just doesn't come quite so naturally, but I kind of got there, and I was like, oh, look what I can do. And a few years later, I was selling credit correlation hedge funds to institutional investors. I was like, how have I learned how to do this? So the kind of self-knowledge was amazing, to be able to stand back and go, look what I've learned was really amazing. And so that in itself taught me that you don't have to know what you're doing in the first place. And even if you do, don't worry if it goes wrong. The most important thing is to find people that you like working with. And I was attracted to Blue Crest really just because of the people that I'd met. And I wanted to keep learning, just say, keep teaching me, I want to keep growing, keep learning, because who knows what's going to happen? Who knows who you're going to meet? Who knows where it will go? So keeping that open mind has been fantastic. That was over 16 years ago now. And I moved from Blue Crest to a credit hedge fund. So I got made redundant from Blue Crest. I was in that kind of new head joins and then restructures. And I did fall out of the to favour at that time, which was devastating to me again, because it's just like, oh, I've been made redundant again. Now what? I was the only person in that team that loved my job. But again, like that boot up the arse it was what I needed. And then I went off and became a salesperson more directly and threw myself into things that I never thought I'd get to. And then how long have I been here? Nearly coming up for 7 years at Legal & General. I got headhunters and I was like, no. I don't think you want me. Because they said we need someone as head of consultant relations. I said, I know the guy that was just doing it. He's been doing it for 30 years. Like, that's not me. And they're like, no, we want someone like you. I was like, really? Okay. So still that element of disbelief, but thrown into a massive job. I was probably partly waving, partly drowning for the first year, and then have relaxed and kind of got my vibe over the last few years. I'm loving it.
Lindsay, looking back on that, and compare, sort of comparing you to David, and you're put. Sorry, David.
That's all right.
There's no comparison really, but you're obviously you said you're outgoing, you're salesy, you've got that in you, and I know David well as well. Probably would never describe himself as a salesman, David, but
no.
Yeah.
Put it this way, you wouldn't buy.
Yeah. I mean, is there a need for us, when we're leaving school, or for somebody to just put us on a look, you've got these traits, this is what you should be looking at, and are we really giving people that advice and help?
No, not at all. Because I mean, the education system is fundamentally flawed, and that we attribute success to clearly measurable, definable in traditional terms, academic criteria or characterization or characteristics. You're a maths person, or you're a words person, or you're good at music, or you're good at sports, or you're good at like a subject. Basically, like, which subject are you good at? And then keep doing that subject. And obviously our UK education system is like narrow as soon as you can. And what that doesn't do enough is explore personality traits, skill sets, transferable skills, like understanding, we know, this is kind of a known about the kind of failures of the education system. It kind of goes all the way through. It's because also, we feel like we all need to hire SMEs into businesses, and they all need to have been good at a thing. Show me on your CV how good you are at this thing, rather than who are you as a person? Like, are you loyal? Are you going to work hard? Are you keen to learn? What are you kind of, personality traits? So in fact, it's one of the reasons I'm involved in a number of different mentoring programs, but one of them, now I've forgotten which one it is working with, I think it's Upreach, is working with university students, so their start of their career in university, to basically introduce them to investment management. And I said, please, can you pair me with someone that isn't doing a finance or maths or economics degree? Because I want to show people that there is stuff out there, because I would never have thought about investment management or anything finance related.
Brilliant. Thanks. Thank you, Lindsay. And a high?
Gosh, but I mean, probably landing a role at LGIM for me was like massive kudos. It felt really special because it was a kind of a real badge of a title for me. I think the reality of the high is more where I am now in this kind of, I'm just a bit more settled in who I am, this comfort of knowing what value I bring, not being anxious to kind of go, have I demonstrated enough value yet? Do people know what value I bring yet? It's more about the relaxed state of knowing that I can come and speak to you guys and not kind of worry about what anyone really thinks about what I say. It's knowing the value I bring, knowing how to kind of go, you know what, today is a day for my children, or today is, you know, my kids have been ill for the last few days, so it's just like, today I'm just going to pivot and spend time with them and not be worried about that kind of, oh God, but I must, you know, make it up, I must do this, I must do that. So I think it's, that to me is more of a high really than, and because you're going back to your point about career and success, and I think it is this kind of measured around what, you know, what do we consider to be success? And like you say, Mark, I think it is about getting that, you know, and I hate the term balance because I don't have it. And funny enough, as a quite slight departure, really relevant, I'm reading a book listening to a book called 4,000 Weeks, which I don't know if anyone else knows. Oliver Berkman, basically saying that on average lifespan is 4,000 weeks, which obviously when you put it in that context sounds absolutely horrifying, and you suddenly go, oh my God, I haven't done enough stuff yet. Yep. What he's trying to do is kind of turn on its head and kind of go, because you're, as you were saying, Mark, when you try to, or I think it was David saying, as you get busy, the busier you try to be, or the more on top of everything you try to be, actually, the more you fail because the more work it creates and so on. So it's a really self-fulfilling kind of negative spiral. So actually what you need to do is just realize that you're never going to get on top of everything because it's not physically possible. It's complete and utter impossibility. So just think about, thank you, Katie, that book. It's just really about that understanding what it is you can do and just making peace with it and enjoying the moments that you are doing it, rather than worrying about what you haven't done or what you haven't done yet and what you could do or what you should do.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Actually, sorry, Mark, I'm just going to make one last point, and it's relevant for you guys, which is Alessandra Wall gave me a really fantastic piece. So I saw her for like 30 minutes after one of your sessions a few years ago. She gave me this wonderful piece of advice, which I try to give to everyone these days, which is there is no such word as should. Like you should never use the word should. I try not to say the word should too often. She said the point is, unless it's legally or physically kind of an imperative, the word should never needs to apply. So the apple, when it falls from a tree, should fall on the ground. When you pull up to a red light, you should stop. Those types of things, like those are kind of the shoulds that make sense. I should go to the gym. I should do some more work this evening. I should put some washing on. I should. These are just self-imposed restrictions that we put on ourselves, and we need to throw them out. That is a need. We need to get rid of them because they really, really limit us. It was one of the most eye-opening things I've heard. So thank you to you and thank you to her for giving that to me, because I do feel it's really, really helpful.
I would like to make a comment based on what Lindsay and David shared, if that's okay. Sometimes, like, I'm very happy that you're sharing your stories, because actually it makes a lot of sense. And I think, Lindsay, you've been really brave in, just changing your career, just putting yourself out there saying, yeah, I want to learn, throw things at me and I'll deal with them. I think that people tend to compare each other a lot. And I think that's where sometimes the stress comes about. People think, oh, by this age, I should be in this role, or I should be a manager or a director or whatever. Exactly. And that, I think, is wrong also because we don't all start from the same point. I think people often don't realize that. a lot of people struggle to get into the role they are at the moment. Other people instead, because of education or other reasons, they kind of fall naturally into certain roles. And I think that's something, that everyone should always keep in mind. Don't make comparisons, and then, because they could be very detrimental and they create a lot of stress. And I think it's just, good to also appreciate what we've done in what we could do. So I love the fact, both you and David shared, your careers and how you got there. I think it's amazing.
Sabrina, you're totally right. And then the really important thing is that, and I've tried to kind of help everybody at work at the moment emphasize this, is that you also have no idea what's going on in other people's lives.
Exactly.
And obviously the pandemic has, to some extent, has kind of opened our eyes to that, because we've suddenly seen into people's homes and just gone, oh, that person is living with their, elderly mother, or that person has this going on, that person has these responsibilities, or that person has no responsibilities. And so, like, no one is the same. You're right. Like, not only do we start from a different point, and certainly when I joined the finance industry, I was like, oh, if only I'd started finance like 6 years ago, I'd be well ahead of it. I'd be earning so much more. But like, I haven't, and that's who I am. So yes, we have a different starting point, but we also have just totally different life experiences, and those are really important to who we are. And it's, there is no level playing field, really. So just stop trying to kind of judge yourself against other people who are playing on a completely different, they're playing a different game, let alone a different pitch. So.
Yeah, agree. Completely.
That different starting point cues you up really beautifully, Nolly.
It does. I was really enjoying listening to what Lindsay was saying, and also what David was saying as well. I mean, amazing. It's so interesting how they've both started out in their careers, and I didn't know David could have been our Prime Minister. So that's the lesson learned for me today. But yeah, so for me, my starting point. So my career actually started in high school. So I moved to the UK when I was a teenager, and when I was in high school, I used to work part-time. And one of the best roles I got was actually working a call center for, I believe, HSBC. And at that time, I think I've been 3 years in the country, didn't really understand the financial system that well. And so that just gave me an opportunity to kind of understand, how the UK financial system works and so forth. And at that time, this was 2006. So this is before the crash, but at that time, for some weird reason, there was a lot of credit card debt and so forth. So we used to take calls and speak to people regarding that. And I just found it so interesting, being able to look at a credit card and the terms and conditions and actually explain it to someone. And then I was sixth form at the time, but I just found that so fascinating. And I thought, you know what, I want to work in finance, because I think, you get on the call with someone and they're so stressed, and then you're like, oh no, actually, this is how it's calculated, this is what you have to pay, and so forth. And then you'd hear the relief in their voice. And I was talking to people from different backgrounds, ages, and so forth. So I thought, you know what, actually, if I work in this industry, work in a way that I can help people dissect numbers and just make them simpler. Went to university. I studied international business and French. I wanted to study accountancy, but then I saw the course I did, and it gave me 2 years to study abroad. And at that time, for me, that was the only opportunity I'd have gotten to do that, because I couldn't afford to do a gap year or anything. So then I finished university, and I still had it in my mind, I want to be an accountant. And so I was still looking around for sort of graduate roles in finance, in accountancy, but it was really hard to break into the industry. And then I was back in a call center again, in Essex, living at home. And then, to cut the long story short, I ended up having my daughter about 2 years after I graduated, before my career had started. And then I had caring responsibilities for my mom, who's she's disabled, and she was very ill at the time. So that became something that was difficult, trying to find a job, work part-time, with caring responsibilities. And I ended up working as an accounts assistant and doing the AAT exams. Because I was like, okay, I'm going to still be an accountant, but I'm just going to take my time. Like you were saying, Sabrina, about comparison, I thought, I'm not going to compare myself. This is where I'm at. This is where I'm starting at. And it's just going to take me longer, but this is where I'm going to start. And I did that. And then I finished my AAT exams, and then I had to look for a job with the local firm But because I lived in Essex and was studying part-time, I couldn't find a part-time accountancy role. What I did end up finding was a job with IFDS, who are a third-party administrator for asset management and asset management firms. And so I thought, okay, this is reconciliation, accountancy is reconciliation. I'm just going to go in. And then actually, when I got into the role, I discovered a whole different world. Had nothing to do with accountancy at all. And so I started learning, asset management, how it works. Did a few exams. I really enjoyed it. And then I was working on the first line, sort of managing operational risk and so forth. And after about 4 or 5 years, I started to get an itch. Like, I really want to understand why we do what we do, and I want to progress. And at that point, my caring responsibilities were less. My daughter was older, so I wanted to move to London, and that's where Mark and E2W come in, actually. Because what happened is I was just feeling really frustrated, didn't know what to do next. I didn't want to be an accountant anymore, wanted to work in risk and asset management, and I didn't know how to do it. And then a friend of mine told me about the Young Women's Trust, which E2W support, and you just did the half marathon, the London half marathon for them, and they gave me a career coach. And she was literally that. She asked me, what are your challenges? How do you feel about the industry? What are you struggling with? So unlike Mark and Lindsay, at that point, I then came up with the career plan with my coach. And she said, if this is what you want to do, this is how you can do it. And then I think I met Mark because I posted something or was doing stuff for the Young Women's Trust. And then I found out about E2W, how they could assist me. I joined and started expanding my network. And I used the Careers Club. I think I've used almost every service E2W has. I've used, the CV writing. I used everything E2W has, the network of women, and that's what landed me this role as well. I actually work for Legal and General Capital. Haven't met you, Lindsay,
No,
but I met. I'm in City Place, not Coleman.
Oh, you're around the corner. Okay.
yeah, like 5 minutes away. Yeah, but we're coming to Coleman soon, so we'll probably be in the same building soon. But yeah, so for me, it's been really about having that plan for me helped me, because at that time, having caring responsibilities and everything else, I just felt like I needed some type of structure and something to work from. Now I work for Legal and General Capital. It's completely different to what I did before. It's a second line role. I am, looking at different types of risk. It's not just finances we're dealing with, because we invest in alternative assets. So it's construction, we do venture capital, we do lots of interesting stuff. So even though I have my plan, I'm still not like, strict with it. Like I have to go left and that's it. I still am open to whatever the world and the universe and my network and the people around me bring. I'll take it. And so far I'm really enjoying it. I think, this company was a very good match for me, because also took me time to get this role. Mark, you can attest to that. It's probably well over a year, isn't it?
Yeah, Nolly, and I think so. Your story is wonderful, and thank you for being Nolly, actually. But I think the what is interesting, in the industry are constantly talking about women returners, but there's an expectation there that you've had a career, and then you've had a baby.
Exactly. Yeah.
I meet so many women like yourself who had a baby very early in their career, and like you are wonderful, destined for high places, but it takes you so long then.
It does,
because of that different starting place.
It does. It does. Yeah. It definitely does. Yeah. And I read the book by Sheryl Sandberg. And she talks about, she says, now the career is not a ladder anymore. It is a jungle gym. So previously it used to be you start at this stage and then you keep climbing and then you go to the next stage. But now it's a jungle gym. And I think for me, it was definitely a jungle gym. It wasn't start your career, work your way up. It was start a career, have a baby, detour, go up, go around, just like a jungle gym. But eventually you still, and I know I will still end up where I need to get to, where I want to get to. but it just looks slightly different. And I think with the industry we work in is quite challenging because, yeah, as you said, Mark, it takes a whole lot longer to do that, but you still get there in the end.
Yeah, I can identify with that jungle gym analogy. I like that, actually. If I look at my career, I wondered whether for a long time whether it was just self-justification, but I think it's how did I end up here? But I think it's not, and it's not unique. And I think I did a little bit of work at a previous firm. They did it was only really a day's course on intergenerational management and the expectations and the expectations, requirements, whatever you want to call it, of sort of Gen Z, going to be very different. There's going to be, whereas previously you might have, I had a cut by the time I had 3 names of my CV, my stepfather was sort of telling me, well, you're moving around an awful lot, and there will be 5 or 6 names on a CV before the graduate hits 26, 27, because that's just the way it will work. And I think we'll have to get comfortable ourselves, or if my generation, whatever one I am, Christ, I don't even want to think about it, but X or Y, whatever, we'll have to get used to that. And we'll also have to appreciate and learn to capitalize on the skills and the experience that comes with younger members of the workforce going through that development process. So you can't look at CVs and 6 names, I don't care what did they learn there. It's it's one of those things, what does that person learn, not how long do they manage to stay there, because you can hide in any organization for a period of time. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that changes all over time.
I definitely
can't. Sorry, Nolly, I was only going to say, so I'm a little bit of I have a tendency, I recognize this, that I'm a little bit of the old school when I look at CVs and I see people jumping around. And obviously I've moved around myself, but there is this slight question of going back to the point about patience. And I do wonder if, like this kind of book, the 4,000 Weeks kind of talks about, we're all in this kind of spiral or kind of this treadmill that seems to be getting faster and faster. And the modern, one of the points that the book makes is that modern technology that is designed to assist us actually makes things worse. If you think that email makes it really possible for lots of people to contact you and you respond to large volumes of messages, when every time you reply to an email, all you're doing is creating people, emails to send you back. So actually it just makes the problems worse. But as a consequence, so we're on this kind of roller coaster, and social media and kind of 24-hour contact to the global world makes us all kind of feel like I need to get here, I must be doing this by now, this person's here by now, I could do this. So this kind of FOMO sense of just like, if I haven't got promoted, and I've had kind of juniors reporting me going, well, I want to get promoted in the next year, otherwise I'm off. And it's just like, well, maybe just learn and listen and sit and build experience, because I know it's really boring. It feels like it's really boring. But actually, that's when it all comes. It's just by kind of just being a bit more patient. But so I know there's a flip side to that. But I do see a lot of people moving around because they feel like there's the grass is greener on a regular basis.
Yeah. Lindsay, I did that myself. Sorry, go on, Nolly.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think the challenge that I found as well when I was looking for a job, particularly after I had my daughter, is that I guess when people only use your CV to determine who you are, how skilled you are, and they don't take that time to actually speak with yourself, sometimes they build an image that's not necessarily accurate. So I would get, oh, well, you've shifted a lot. And this is previously. And it was like, well, that was only because I had caring responsibilities. And so when things change, my daughter gets older, I can't work for this firm anymore because they won't allow me to work around school hours, or I can only work locally, but no one's employing, because I don't live in London, I live in Essex. So they weren't necessarily employing a part-time accounts assistant, so I had to start working full-time. But it was a constant thing of, I'd hand my CV over and say, oh, well, why haven't you stayed that long? And then you're explaining, but then it's like, yeah, no, that doesn't look good. And so it can be quite limiting sometimes.
People need to listen. Yeah, they definitely exactly. Like I recognise that it's very easy to judge, and that's also why I hate CVs as a way to kind of judge people.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you're totally right.
Yeah, I think now we're in a world where I think, like we talk about bringing your entire self. I think people do look at CVs, but a lot of it is dependent on your interview what have you done? What have you achieved? And sometimes I find, especially having done the careers course with yourselves, Mark, what you've done and what your CV says is not necessarily, don't always correlate. It's not always identical. They don't always mirror each other. So I think we're fortunate now that it's not just based on just your CV. That interview process is pretty essential.
Mark, I was going to say one thing to not confuse, is I listened particularly what Nolly was saying about having a plan, and me not having a plan either by design, not particularly by design. And I want to separate not having a plan with not seeking advice, like from a career. I've used the career coach, who's excellent career coach, has made a huge difference to my life and my professional career. And, you know, using, CV review services, I should call you that, Mark, but, you know, and never thinking that after being, I don't know, what, 44 and looking for a role, that I couldn't learn something from somebody about my CV, namely, David, this tells me everything that you've done and nothing of what you've achieved, you know, was hugely helpful. So separate those two things out. I'm not saying don't have a plan, or if you have a plan, don't have a plan, but all the rest of it that goes with it, the person who may have helped you design that plan may help you do something else, may just provide you with a few pointers and a few techniques, examples, a toolbox of skills to use and techniques to use to manage your career, or managing your working life is probably a better phrase.
There is also another thing, and that's, Lindsay, I think you made the point. I think it's very important. Very often when you ask young women, or they get confused, they're thinking, oh, what should I do next? Where should I go? There must be lots of opportunities. What should I do? And when I say, what is it that you really like? Or are you enjoying yourself in your job? And it's like, oh my God, I've never asked myself this question. Because I think it's fundamental to think, do I like it? Do I like what I'm doing? And if I don't, that's when I really need to change. But if you are always running for something else, maybe the first question to ask is, are you happy? Do you like what you're doing? Yeah. That's one thing which I agree. Important. And it's also your choice of the beginning of your career was interesting, Lindsay, from that perspective, because I like the fact that you did what you wanted to do. In a way, even if it didn't work out, but that's super important, to do what you want to do. And sometimes you don't necessarily know, but to at least enjoy yourself. And the other thing that I tend to say to the people I talk to is always look back. If you feel like you're not moving, you might miss opportunities, or you're a little bit, always look back at the last 6 months and see what can you put on your CV. If you can't put anything new in your CV for the last 6 months of your work, maybe you need to change something. So looking back to say, okay, I need to make a move, or I need to do, because I haven't progressed, I haven't moved, whatever it is in the CV, what have I achieved, what have I learned, etc. But can I put one line at least in my CV to say, what have I done over the last 6 months? And if I haven't, maybe it's to start thinking about, okay, what should I do next to move forward in whatever direction it is, doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's interesting. Going back to the classic interview question that David referenced earlier, which is where do you see yourself in 5 years? I've also always been, I have no idea. But I had that question when I joined here, and my boss said, where do you want to see yourself in 5 years? I said, I've got no idea, but I tend to be like, keep going up, keep going up, keep going up.
Yeah.
That attitude has changed a little bit. Now I'm older, so there is a point to which the funnel narrows, and so you kind of also there. And my life, I've got 2 young kids, so it's just like I've always kind of thought, yeah, I keep growing. Like I've said, I keep learning, I keep growing. So that just feels like it's in my DNA. But there is a point at which I kind of go, but why? Why am I doing this? We do need to question what am I trying to achieve? Like this whole kind of idea of goals is great, but I find quite challenging, because actually if you set yourself a really specific goal, whatever it might be, what happens when you get there? Has your life fundamentally changed? Have you reached like nirvana, Or is it a bit of a letdown because you suddenly realize? So I've been mentoring one guy who's like, I want to be head of distribution. He said, I'm really good at sales. I'm really good at client management. I'm really good at this. I want to be head of distribution. And I was like, you do realize that doesn't involve any of the things that you said you really enjoy doing and you're good at. It's a completely different role. Just because it sounds important doesn't mean it's going to be good for you. And keeping progressing feels like something you should do until you kind of go, but why am I doing it? So the coach that I had kind of was like, why? And my boss has done this on a regular basis. Why do you want to keep progressing? Why do you want a C-suite role? Why do you want this? And I was like, I don't know. So actually coaching has been valuable alongside therapy, because therapy is when you kind of go, oh God, why am I doing any of this? Because actually I would recommend more than anything else that every single person has counseling or therapy to understand their drivers, because it's all very well sitting down with the coach, go, I want to do this. And they go, great, do this, and then you'll get to that. Bang. Are you happy at the end? No. Why am I not happy? Oh, because that's not actually what I was chasing. I'm chasing something else. So anyway, it's a long-winded way, but that kind of more holistic approach on careers, I think, is really important. Or just like you said, work balance.
I would back that 100% comment on therapy of whatever description. The coaching relationship can be sort of quasi-therapeutic, but absolutely, you can have, couldn't agree more.
Yeah, same. I agree with everything that both Lindsay and David have said. And yeah, just to expand, I think slightly on the holistic approach, I agree 100% about having a holistic approach to our careers. I mean, for me, particularly making this move, yes, it took a while because of the market and the pandemic, but it was paramount that I moved from where I was to a company that had a good culture. And I think traditionally, maybe I certainly used to be motivated by just money, but now I think the company culture, the people, do they walk the walk and talk the talk, and what does their leadership look like? Is it a diverse enough company? What is their reputation and so forth? What charities do they support? Are they aligned with my personal values and goals? So yeah.
It's an interesting one now, is about flexibility of your location for working. If I think about it now, you keep one eye on the market, and there's some firms that are doing, would I work for a firm that said you need to be in the office 5 days a week? I think in certain circumstances, if I had to, I would, but given a choice, not a chance. They wouldn't make it onto the list of places I'd want to be, because it speaks volumes, and it's not personal preference. Don't want to be in the office all the time, but it also speaks volumes about their attitude towards their staff. And Goldman's a very successful place, and I'm sure they'd have a very good argument for it, but I'm not a buyer.
Just coming back, and Lilia, can I ask you a question? So just you've made a significant number of role changes in the last 20 years. How have you coped with that? Why have you made them? If people ask you about them, like I am now, how do you feel the need to justify it? What's the story?
Was it me?
Yes.
Okay. The story is a bit like David. It's going with when an opportunity comes up, taking it. There's been stories which have been interrupted against my will in a way. Yeah. So redundancies have been great because they've always opened new ways, which I would never have considered without them. So when I explain the evolution, some of them are due to redundancies. I've been rethinking, did I want to stay in financial services or not? Because it had been the first 10 years of my career and I hadn't questioned it. And that forced me to question it and to say, yes, I want to. And then moving into a different direction. It's also finding opportunities to discover new aspects of my life. I started my career thinking I was analytical, I was an auditor, etc. And 10 years later, I discovered that I was a sales and business development person, which I would never have considered if it hadn't been pushed or noticed in that direction. So I would say some moves have been forced, but very beneficial. And others, I have triggered and made a mistake. And I say it, I've made a mistake when I ran out of one job because I was frustrated and went into another one too quickly. I got bored during 2 years, which were dreadful. Generally speaking, what I do, and maybe it's it's old style as well, and I'm talking a lot to my children. I don't know if it's still valid, but in my mind, and having worked for companies like JP Morgan and others, I've always thought that you stay in a job for a maximum of 3 years, wherever it is, and then move on. After 3 years, you reach a ceiling where you don't learn more. You're just sitting on your laurels, and I don't think it's healthy to hang around after 3 years. So it's always a little bit of my limit to say, if you're there still, you're probably not really challenging yourself, moving around, etc. And I think it's still important for me, from a personal point of view. I need to feel challenged and to feel like I'm moving forward. Whatever my personal circumstances, I still need to be happy at work. If I'm not happy at work, I'm not happy anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's the story of my life. Yeah, so I always have some explanations of the changes, but I know that the changes have always been, well, positive, except the ones that I've triggered myself, unfortunately.
Thank you, Lily. So it's 1 o'clock, and I know people have got other things in their diaries. Lindsay, David, Nolly, thank you so much. Sabrina, Nilma, and Sue, and everybody who's contributed. Thank you so much. A brilliant session today. And love your stories, Nolly, David, and Lindsay. Just a quick one. Next week, I'm asking for your help, if I may. I've got some things that we're doing with Men for Inclusion that I'd like to share. They're taking things forward, but I'd quite like your feedback on how credible it sounds, whether it resonates with you, and whether I should be saying different things. So that's next week's coffee break. Look forward to seeing you all then. I know people have got to rush, so I'm going to say thank you again.